Do you think that the reason for the abundance of diabetes in America is gluttony, or the fact that we don't live the lifestyle and our food? We've got all these additives in the food. How much does that have to play?
I think it's a combination of factors. So number one, the food supply is messed up, and you're right, because of the fact that in order to make the food taste good or to package it, whatever they have to do, sugar is in everything. They've just identified that that's something. So whether it's, and if it's not sugar, then they put some form of sweetener in there, high fructose corn syrup or something, which in effect does the same thing to mess you up. And that's not a good idea. And on top of that, and more importantly, the automobile has really damaged everything, because the automobile is not the horse. The horse required that you be active. I mean, you have to jump on it, you got to take care of it, and so on and so forth. The car is just a passive, 4 wheels, and you just sit, and around it takes you, So it's a magic machine which has destroyed your ability to have an energy expenditure which is reasonable and would permit you to match up with your diet, to have a balance, Because people say, well, you're eating too much and so on. Too much? What do you mean? I mean, I could be taking, 700 calories, and it's too much for the amount of energy that I'm expending. So the reality is, in order to have a reasonable diet, to get the various foods represented that I need, I've got to eat about 1,800 calories in order to have a nice balanced diet. But 1,800 calories means I've got to spend 1,800 calories a day to have a balance. How am I going to spend 1,800 calories when I'm in a situation where it's almost like a hunger strike, where you're sitting in the corner?
Yeah.
Hunger strikers, they sit in the corner, and their energy requirement is 500, let's say. But they don't eat anything either, they're just sitting there. So we get into that posture, but we still want the 1,800 calories in a meal, in a single meal, Because if you look at the calorie counts that they tell you at one of the movie theaters and so on, some of those, Southwestern specialties and stuff, that those are 1,600 calories just for the movie meal.
Wow.
With the nachos and the melted cheese and stuff like that. Now, if you've had that right there, and then you go home, and then breakfast, and 3,000 calories. So the kids right now, if you look at them, they look like little barrels.
Yeah.
And they have diabetes, from square one. That wasn't the case. You see, and their parents are messed up. So, take a look, particularly in our area here, Rural Appalachia, you take a look at the people and their size, and you know that there's an issue. And part of the issue is the exercise and the activity. Part of it is the food supply and the refined sugars and so on and so forth. And to top it all off, the food supply spiked with estrogens and growth factors and so on, which are there because they make, the poultry big, and they make, the vegetable produce a little bit different than they make the cow and the beef. But then you're going to eat it. So whatever it did to the beef and the poultry, it's going to do to you. You see? And therefore, it's this loop that we're caught in, and somehow you need to break out of it.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
But it's not that hard, because we are in an area here, for example, that has farms.
Yeah.
You have produce, you have access to produce, markets. There's nice walks along the river. I mean, you don't really need the car to get around in a small town.
Well, the mental control to do these things. I used to smoke 5 packs of cigarettes a day, and I quit cold turkey, thank God. But I tried to quit 2 or 3 times before, and it wasn't easy.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing I was wondering is there a correlation, with the hormonal imbalance and everything, is there a correlation between even diabetes and the abundance of depression that is in the United States?
Absolutely. We talked about that this morning, as a matter of fact. So it goes both ways, I guess. People that are depressed and stressed out, that creates an imbalance in their hormones, because there are certain hormones that get produced, like cortisol and other things that get produced, and they work against the insulin. And there are other factors, that are even more damaging than cortisol, and they also get produced, and the brain controls a lot of that. So it can really grind down the pancreas in a way and generate an environment. It can also foster inactivity. It can also lead to people eating in ways that they don't really, need to, but it just makes them feel better. So all of that leads in and can push you. And then the diabetes can also exacerbate the depression, because people, say, geez, this is terrible. Now I have to measure this, and I have to do this, and I have to do the other, and take these medicines, and I'm really upset. So, and that makes it worse. You know, so it works both ways, and depression really factors in. So when we deal with diabetes treatment, we have to address the stress element.
Yeah.
In addition to the other.
There's so many factors involved that obviously we couldn't cover it in just one thing. Do you have a website that people could get more information about you and diabetes?
Yeah, well, certainly because I'm now new with the group here, we haven't really set up everything that we're going to be doing with the UMA. But Ohio University obviously has a website, and we're actually going to be adding to that.
Okay.
You know, where we're meeting with some of the people in the food and nutrition department, because we want to emphasize that aspect of it. The Diabetes Institute also, here at Ohio University, has a website where some of the information that we discussed is available. And certainly here at the University of Medical Associates, you know, it's a resource.
I also got some information off of WebMD.com.
That's correct.
And
so they have some good information there too. So it's a matter of putting it together. I just remind people, you know, that when you want to get a balance to life, you know, to diabetes certainly, it's like the 4 pegs to the table, you know, 4 legs to the table. So you have diet, you have exercise, you have medications, and you have stress and sleep. You see,
and all of those are things.
and you have to have them all addressed, because like a table can't stand on 3 legs.
Right.
You know, and usually what happens is we deal with everything, but we forget, you know, the stress and sleep aspect, which you mentioned, and that's very, very important.
Yeah.
And that's why in a team like this, you know, we have social workers that address some of these issues, dietitians, doctors, exercise physiologists, so that all of these pieces come together, and there's outreach.
Is there a unity within doctors involved with diabetes and the endocrine system? Is there variables to where one doctor might say one thing and one will say another? I'm reminded of at one time they considered butter to be bad for your health, and they said margarine. Now they consider margarine as bad, and it's okay to eat butter. Are there major differences of opinion?
Well, there are. It's like everything else. I mean, you have it in religion, you know, too. So we have general consensus, you know, that there's one God and everything else, but then there are various ways of approaching the issue, and we all think that we have an angle. But the fact is that the best way to look at it is to look at what nature has provided for. So nature has provided for certain rhythms, and the rhythms are usually based on the light cycle, sunset, sunrise, and so on, and that's how the system works. Now we've defeated all of those because, like I mentioned, we have electricity, we can make night day, we can heat in the middle of the night, we have night schedules, we can, you know, so we're throwing it off. We're not working in sync with what the body has provided.
Right.
And if you don't, and so we as physicians, I mean, should, most do, but we need to understand or see how the system functions, what it's been primed to do. And usually it doesn't come with an instruction manual, but if you go into the history and you ask people where they're from, so you get a general idea. And then we look to work within that seasonal environment that people have adapted to over generations. So if you take somebody, you know, from the mists of Ireland or Sweden, you know, and you transplant them into some African country, it's not going to be 100% the way it should be. There'll be major issues over time, and the same thing happens, you know, so it takes generations to settle into a particular lifestyle with a diet and activity program and so on and so forth. And therefore, as you said, you can't generalize 100%. So the Eskimo has a particular diet and it works for them, but that particular blubber, let's say, in a different environment might not be the way to go. And the Northern European, who's used to dairy and has a lot of it and so on, has a different arrangement. But that particular diet, you know, transposed to someone who might be from Southeast Asia, would not be the best, you know, to offer. And so we need to be sensitive to some of these differences, and we obviously allow for that, but we also look for the balance: protein, carbohydrate, fat, and we make some allowances, and we try to work with the body's rhythms, as I mentioned.
We've certainly enjoyed the conversation with you, Doctor, and we're going to have information on our article about how to get a hold of you, and if they live in Ohio, they can come and see. And we would like to let everyone know that, you know, we've got to take care of our body, because the same It's the same scripture that we use for you can't smoke because it harms your body. It works the same way with gluttony and eating the wrong things and everything else. So there's a lot involved, that to be good Christians, even to be good people, there's a lot of work and a lot of things we have to do. Enjoyed it, Doctor?
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. And as you mentioned, with Christianity and so on, there are fasts planned for. There's a certain element of balance, which is very much encouraged. And all of this goes exactly into the spiritual dimension, which is very, very important in order to have that psychological balance that's important for us.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.